It was the week before Christmas in 2023. Broomfield, Colorado, a quiet suburb nestled between Denver and Boulder, had begun to slow down for the holidays. Families were decorating homes, children were finishing up their last days of school, and the air carried that familiar mix of cold and comfort that comes with winter in the Rockies. But inside one home on Promontory Loop, silence had replaced the usual rhythm of a busy household. That Thursday morning, December 14th, police dispatch received a call from a worried husband. His wife, he said, had stopped answering her phone. She'd missed a meeting with a detective she'd been in contact with, and she wasn't responding to messages. It wasn't like her, not at all. The woman's name was Kristil Krug, 43 years old, a mother of 3, a project manager at a tech company in Boulder.
Hello.
Oh, I'm their neighbor, and they called me. Like, can you go see if she'll answer the...
Oh, yeah, he sent us as well, so.
Oh, shit. Holy shit.
Those who knew her described her as sharp, kind, and tireless. Someone who balanced her career and motherhood with quiet strength. But for the last few months, Kristil had been living in fear. A man, someone she believed to be an old college boyfriend, had been sending her violent, disturbing messages. The harassment had escalated from unwanted texts to explicit threats. She'd done everything right, reported it to police, documented each message, even taken self-defense training. Yet the stalker never stopped, and now she wasn't answering her phone.
151, send medical, and 110, I need a 4th entry. I got a female down in the garage. Broomfield Police! Broomfield Police!
Hands on your face now! Hands on your face!
Our hearts go out to the family and loved ones of Kristil Krug. She will be remembered for her strength, kindness, and devotion to her children. May her memory bring comfort and her story inspire awareness, courage, and compassion. This is True Crime Diaries, where we delve deep into the most chilling and complex criminal cases, bringing you the untold stories behind the headlines. Join us as we uncover the facts, the twists, and the shocking truths behind some of the darkest moments in history. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping stories. Let us know your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you. When Officer O'Hare from the Broomfield Police Department arrived at the Krug home around 10 a.m., the first thing he noticed was the stillness. The only sound came from Pixel, the family's small dog, barking endlessly from somewhere inside. A neighbor, a friend of Kristil's, had also arrived, sent by the family to check on her. They knocked, called her name, rang the bell. No answer. O'Hare circled the house, checking windows and doors. When he reached the garage, he noticed the family car parked inside, but the windows were too high to see through. He pulled his patrol car into the driveway, climbed onto the front bumper, and looked inside. What he saw would stay with him forever. At the bottom of the steps lay a woman. She wasn't moving. Blood pooled near her head, dark against the gray concrete. Backup and paramedics were called immediately. Within minutes, flashing lights lined the quiet street, painting streaks of red and blue across the snow. When first responders reached her, there was no pulse. Attempts to revive her failed. It was Kristil Krug. At first glance, it looked like a tragic accident. Maybe a fall down the steps, a blow to the head, but the details didn't match the picture. Paramedics discovered not just head trauma, but a stab wound, clean and deliberate, just above her heart. There was no knife in sight. Inside the house, everything appeared undisturbed. No overturned furniture, no signs of forced entry. Her purse still held her concealed carry handgun, untouched. Whoever had attacked her had caught her completely off guard.
And said there was a stalker threatening to kidnap her, so I don't know. No, she's unresponsive. Decent head wound.
Where we have more room at the head.
I'll be right back, guys. I'm just going to the car here. Hey, man, just run interference for me. Well, she's CPR being done in the garage. She's got a good head wound. I think it's from falling down, but I'm going to reevaluate that right now.
As police began to secure the scene, a small crowd of family and neighbors gathered on the street, shivering in disbelief. Among them was Kristil's husband, Daniel Krug. He had been the one to call police, saying he couldn't reach her after leaving for work earlier that morning.
Stay back. This is my house.
I understand.
Need to get his phone away from him because he's probably got access to this camera, and we obviously don't want him to look at it.
At first, Daniel appeared devastated, distraught, confused, emotional. He told officers that Kristil was supposed to meet with a detective later that morning about her stalker, the same stalker who had made their lives miserable for weeks. Her mother, Linda, soon arrived too, joined by Kristil's brother and his wife. They waited outside in the cold as police worked inside. The scene was chaotic, but one fact stood out immediately. Kristil had been terrified of someone, and that someone had finally reached her. As investigators began combing through the home, they discovered what looked like a digital paper trail, emails, screenshots, and handwritten notes. Kristil had been methodical in documenting every contact with her alleged stalker. She kept a diary, listing every message, every phone number, every email address. Her last entry was just 2 days before her death. Detectives quickly connected the dots. The man Kristil believed was behind the harassment, someone she referred to as Anthony, an ex-boyfriend from her college years, had been sending messages that grew more threatening by the week. In one, he warned her that her husband might need to drive safe, hinting at harm. In another, he claimed to have tampered with her car. It was clear that Kristil had lived her final months under immense psychological strain.
No, the backstory. Husband said there was a dude who's been stalking her and threatened to kidnap her.
Where's this
And
dude
Martinez
from?
was involved, and Martinez just said, "Hey, this is a
Jim
big
or
old."
something?
I don't know, dude. I don't know the history on that part. Martinez does though, and he said he's coming in. So, like I told him, you can see if Butler needs photos with this big old house. Other than that, we're just kind of securing the scene and waiting for detectives, you know.
I wonder if maybe the door was unlocked. That's how he got in.
You know what?
Was it deadbolted?
You know what? I don't know. I kicked it and it went pretty easy, so I'm going to say no.
No, it wasn't deadbolted. It was just unlocked.
Yeah, you know what? That bottom one does not even lock. There's no way to lock the
The
bottom
door
one.
was unlocked.
It's all deadbolt.
Yeah.
And I right away saw her on the ground, blood smear on the wall. I came around here and
You
forced
said
entry.
the garage door looked weird.
Let's look at it. It looks not forced entry weird, but not proper alignment weird either. See what I'm talking about? It looks like maybe it's just, I don't know, dude. Just
When you were in the house, when you swept the house?
Yeah, we did. And I didn't see anything like disturbance-wise or anything in the house. Outside in the garage is her car keys and looked like she was just leaving.
Okay.
Unless she maybe got rigid at the front door and ran that way. I don't know. But her car keys were at her side. Or a set
Did
of
you
car
see
keys.
anything else on the inside?
No, nothing of note.
She'd taken extraordinary steps to protect herself, installing more security cameras, carrying a weapon, even establishing a safety routine with friends and family. And yet, all that precaution didn't save her. For Officer O'Hare and the early investigators, one question hung in the cold air. Was Kristil's death the final act of a stalker who had finally made good on his threats, or something far more complicated? Before long, they would find that the answer was both darker and stranger than anyone could have imagined. Detectives arrived at the Krug residence within hours, methodically piecing together what had happened inside that quiet suburban home. It didn't take long to notice that this wasn't a random break-in or robbery. The crime was deliberate, calculated, and disturbingly clean. 4 of the home's exterior security cameras had been disabled that morning, each within minutes of one another, around 8:15 a.m. 3 of them had gone offline completely. The front door camera had a piece of blue tape covering the lens, blocking its view. The only camera that kept recording through the morning was the one trained on the garage door. It showed Kristil returning home after dropping off her children at school. She backed her car into the garage at 7:57 a.m. The next movement on camera came at 8:24 when her husband, Daniel, left for work. Between those two moments lay the window of the murder. When detectives examined the garage door, there were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no pried open handles. It looked as if Kristil had either left the door unlocked or had willingly opened it for someone she knew. Inside, police cataloged everything: her purse, her phone, her laptop. Each item was neatly placed, untouched except for the blood on the garage floor. Upstairs, investigators found a small stack of documents, printed screenshots of threatening emails, handwritten notes about calls from unfamiliar numbers, and a list titled Anthony, Timeline of Contact. Detective Martinez, who had been working with Kristil for weeks on the stalking case, arrived soon after. For him, the scene hit hard. He knew how frightened she had been. She had called him often, sometimes in tears, convinced that her stalker was escalating. She had described feeling watched, followed, manipulated. Now she was gone. That morning, Martinez began retracing every detail of the stalking investigation. He requested immediate access to the phone numbers and IP addresses linked to the threatening messages. But digital warrants take time, and time had already cost Kristil her life. Meanwhile, Daniel Krug, Kristil's husband of 16 years, was escorted to the police station. Detectives described it as a soft interview. He was a grieving husband, not yet a suspect. He spoke slowly, appearing shocked, occasionally breaking down as he recounted the morning's routine. He told them he'd left for work around 8, as usual. Kristil had been alive then. He said she texted him at 8:56 a.m., asking him to pick up their daughter later that day. That was her last known message. To police, Daniel's story initially made sense, but small inconsistencies began to surface. If you're drawn in by how this story unfolds, take a second to hit subscribe, because what comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew about this case. For one, Kristil's phone had gone dark just a minute after 8:19 a.m., completely powered off. Data analysis later showed that no activity occurred again until much later, when the message to Daniel was sent. That meant it hadn't been written in real time. It had been scheduled to send automatically. When asked about their marriage, Daniel said things had been fine, normal, stressful because of the stalking, but loving. Yet investigators soon discovered a very different picture in Kristil's diary. In her private notes, she wrote that she wanted a divorce, that she no longer trusted her husband, that she didn't feel safe around him. Her entries were careful, dated, factual. The kind you write not to vent, but to record. Detectives also noticed something else: the precision of the crime scene, the cameras taken offline, the timing of the murder, the absence of a murder weapon. Whoever killed Kristil had known how her security system worked, and had known exactly when she'd be alone. Back at the station, Daniel remained calm. He expressed sorrow, confusion, and exhaustion. When detectives asked about the stalker, he was quick to describe how terrifying it had been for their family. He said he and Kristil had received threats that mentioned him by name. He even joked that he'd nicknamed the stalker Kickman.
I'm sorry I didn't answer. Largely, I've been focused on her and the kids, and I've been holed up at the house. Yeah. I went to the grocery store briefly on Tuesday, and someone behind me dropped a can, and I fucking panicked. So what am I doing? I'm panicking. And I'm doing a shit job of protecting my wife. So I'm not doing good. Yeah, I can see that. And in typical cop fashion, he married a prosecutor. So I had Lynn's voice in my head going, get a fucking lawyer. I just want this to be done. I don't want to go home. I just don't want to. I left. She was in the kitchen. She would have had whatever meetings that she had. Then she said she was meeting with you. But you know nothing about that, so I have no idea what the fuck that is. What's his name? The other detective said that the cameras were turned off. That shouldn't happen. The only way that the cameras can be turned off is through the app. One of us has to hit the button. Someone came to the door. She doesn't usually answer the door. But she must have, because she must have. So in my brain, the story that I have is someone came to the door. Maybe she went outside to get a package, and they must have come in. And
You think either she was taken off guard or it was somebody familiar to her?
I don't know who familiar would have been. She had to have been taken off guard. I felt like she was keeping secrets from all way. She didn't tell me about that man. She was disappearing for hours. She kept leaving early, coming home late. Class. Where? She wouldn't tell me. I asked if she said no.
Because as he put it, I just want to kick him out of our lives. Detective Martinez listened carefully. Something didn't sit right. He remembered that the so-called stalker, Anthony, had been hard to trace. The emails had come from disposable accounts, the phone numbers from prepaid SIM cards. But now that a murder had occurred, the digital trail would be prioritized. The subpoenas for data from service providers were marked urgent. While Daniel waited at the station, investigators combed through the Krug home. They found her gun safe, still locked. Her firearm, the one she had trained with for protection, untouched. It confirmed what they already suspected. She hadn't seen her attacker coming. By that evening, Martinez got word back from the tech companies. The IP addresses linked to the threatening emails traced not to Utah, where Anthony lived, but to Greenwood Village, Colorado, specifically to an IP block registered under the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. It was Daniel Krug's workplace. The detective didn't say anything right away. Instead, he asked Daniel to go over his timeline again. Daniel repeated his morning step by step. He showered, ate breakfast, left at 8, and headed to work. He said Kristil was alive when he left, calm though distant. He said he'd called her twice that morning with no answer. Then when she didn't show up for her meeting with the detective, he grew worried and called for the welfare check. Throughout the interview, Daniel seemed steady, too steady. There were no angry outbursts, no flashes of disbelief, just a kind of muted sadness. When detectives read him his rights, Daniel made a nervous joke. My brother's married to a prosecutor, so her voice is in my head right now telling me to ask for a lawyer.
And in typical cop fashion, he married a prosecutor. So I had Lynn's voice in my head going, get a fucking lawyer.
They let him leave later that day, but quietly every piece of evidence was beginning to point in his direction. What began as the story of a woman hunted by a stalker was turning into something else entirely. A case where the line between victim and predator was starting to blur. And within hours, detectives would discover that the man Kristil feared most had never even existed. By the next morning, the investigation had shifted. What once looked like a stalker's long campaign of terror now appeared to be something entirely different. The man Kristil believed was tormenting her, Anthony, wasn't just innocent. He hadn't even been in Colorado. Detectives in Utah reached Anthony at his home. He was cooperative, confused, and immediately provided proof of his whereabouts. On the night before Kristil's murder, he'd been at work until nearly 10 p.m. The next day, when she was killed, he was shopping with his wife. Store cameras, witnesses, and license plate readers confirmed his story down to the minute. There was no possible way he had driven 6 hours to Colorado, murdered a woman, and returned home without being noticed. That meant the stalker wasn't real, or at least not who everyone thought he was. Detective Martinez's gut feeling had been right. When the subpoenaed data came back from the email service providers, it showed that the IP addresses used to create the Anthony accounts all traced back to Daniel Krug's office network at the Colorado Department of Public Health, the same location where he worked every weekday. The shock was instant. The stalker had been inside the Krug home all along. For weeks, Daniel had pretended to comfort his terrified wife, pretending to be her protector, while secretly tormenting her through fake accounts, burner phones, and anonymous emails. Every vile message, every threat, every chilling warning that she documented had come from the man who slept beside her each night. It was psychological warfare, and it had been working.
I keep trying to remind myself this is intending to be terrorizing. This is intending to scare me. So I'm like, okay, take it back.
The intention to make your life miserable and cause disruption and
yes.
some sort of emotional turmoil is
Yes.
exactly what he's going for.
Yes.
Kristil, Officer Hendry.
Yeah, nice to
Very
meet
good to
you.
meet you. I talked to Dr. Martinez, so I kind of have an
Yes.
idea what's going on.
Yes.
As detectives sifted through Daniel's devices, the picture grew darker. They discovered online purchases of prepaid gift cards, the same ones used to buy burner phones. Security footage from local stores matched his car and, in some cases, Daniel himself. One by one, the digital fingerprints linked back to him. Still, investigators were careful. The evidence was heavy but circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints on a weapon, no direct confession. Then came the messages found on Kristil's phone, the ones that changed everything. At 8:19 a.m., just minutes before her phone went dark, 2 unsent text messages were saved in her drafts. One was addressed to Detective Martinez, the other to her brother. Both contained nearly identical confessions, that she'd had an affair for 18 months, that she and her boyfriend had framed her husband, and that she was headed to the police station to come clean. But here was the problem. None of it was true. The messages were written in Kristil's phone, but never sent. The timestamp showed that her phone powered off just 1 minute later at 8:20 a.m., long before Daniel's departure at 8:24. Forensic data proved the phone was inactive when those texts were later sent out automatically. Someone had scheduled them in advance. Someone who wanted the world to believe she had confessed to something she didn't do. The digital trail pointed to one person, Daniel. Detectives realized he had planned every step. He'd written those fake confessions himself, scheduled them to send after he left for work, and staged his alibi through precise timing. The goal was chillingly clear: to make it look like Kristil's death was a suicide or the result of a lover's quarrel gone wrong. Meanwhile, Daniel remained outwardly calm. He told detectives he was broken, that he couldn't sleep, that he just wanted the real killer caught. But his story no longer matched the data. At 9 p.m., the night before the murder, Daniel's search history showed something even more disturbing. He'd Googled, "How hard would you have to hit someone on the head to make them unconscious? How durable is the human skull to withstand trauma? How hard a hit for head trauma to go unconscious?" It wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. Detectives now believed Daniel had lured Kristil into a trap that morning. He'd stayed home long enough to disable the cameras, struck her from behind to knock her unconscious, and then stabbed her in the chest. He'd cleaned up, locked the gun in her purse, and staged the scene to look like a fall. Finally, before leaving, he scheduled the text that would send from her phone after he'd gone, just enough to distance himself from the time of death. But one thing he couldn't control was Kristil's meticulous documentation. Her notes, her communications with police, her record keeping, all of it told a consistent story. She was terrified of her stalker. She was preparing to leave her husband, and she was trying to rebuild her safety. By the time the pieces came together, Daniel's mask was cracking. He told investigators he was exhausted. He spoke slowly, avoiding eye contact. When asked if he had anything to hide, he said softly, "No." "I just want my kids to be okay," but his actions said otherwise. Detectives watched as he tried to steer conversations away from technical questions. When they mentioned the disabled cameras, he shrugged. When they asked about his work devices, he said IT handled everything, and he didn't know much about networks. When the IP address evidence came up, he simply fell silent. After 4 hours of questioning, Daniel ended the interview. He asked for a lawyer and was released pending further investigation. You're listening to True Crime Diaries. If you haven't already, hit like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing you the real stories that matter. Coming up next, the twist that turned this entire case upside down. Outside the station, reporters were beginning to gather. News of the Broomfield mother found dead had spread quickly. To most, Daniel looked like a devastated husband seeking justice for his wife. Inside the department, detectives knew they were staring at something else. A man who had built a digital maze so intricate, it nearly buried his own crime. Over the next 48 hours, investigators worked around the clock. They seized his computer, his phone, his work records, and the full security footage from surrounding homes. One fact became undeniable. No one else had entered or exited the Krug residence that morning. The killer hadn't come from outside. He was already home. By the second day after Kristil's death, detectives had gathered enough fragments to form a clear, chilling picture. They knew who had stalked her. They knew who had disabled the cameras. They knew who had scheduled the final text. But what they still needed was the bridge between digital evidence and physical proof. That bridge came from Daniel's own mother-in-law. Kristil's mother, Linda, couldn't shake a feeling that something about Daniel's behavior was off. On the morning of her daughter's death, he had called her directly to ask her to check on Kristil. It was a small thing, but it gnawed at her. Daniel had never called her before in all their years of family life. He always went through Kristil's brother. Why now? When Linda spoke to detectives again, her concern deepened. She told them about her daughter's plans to leave the marriage, about late-night arguments, about Kristil's fear that Daniel was growing controlling. She didn't trust him anymore, Linda said quietly. She told me that herself. Detective Martinez took note.
Tell me what's on your mind.
Okay, so, setting aside, because we all know that Dan's under suspicion. So just setting aside the culprit, my daughter was going to get divorced from Dan.
Okay.
She couldn't stand him. He was too volatile with the kids. And she told me that she was going to just live in the basement because she couldn't get enough proof that Dan was being volatile to the kids. And so I don't know if did I say that or did somebody say that? I don't know.
You did tell me that.
I'm just nervous about this and just some of the conversations that we're having with him, wanting to get rid of all our stuff. And
Could you give me a little bit more insight on that, Linda? What kind of conversations have you had with Dan following Thursday?
Well, just the one that was really troubling me was just the fact that he, was talking about he wants to sell the house. And I understand. So here's the thing. Everything he says could be justified away, right? And that I know was my daughter's frustration because Dan can be pretty manipulative. That's just his kind of character. But what really struck me is that he was talking about throwing her things out, and I can get rid of her. He actually said I can get rid of her bras and underwear and, ripped t-shirts and whatever. And, we can put the dresses and shoes that the kids love down away and zip them away. And, this may be just Dan's way. He's quirky and weird of dealing with it. But it just did not set right with me at all.
Back at headquarters, digital forensics painted a damning timeline. Daniel's car had never left the area after he supposedly went to work. His phone's GPS pinged near Promontory Loop for longer than he claimed. His search history showed not just violence, but intent. Questions about killing techniques, unconsciousness, and how to clean up blood. Then came the phone data analysis. The threatening messages had been sent from burner phones purchased with prepaid cards. Investigators traced those cards back to a local supermarket. Security footage showed Daniel making the purchases, first one, then another, then a third. each corresponding to the dates when Kristil received new waves of harassment. When police confronted Daniel with this evidence, he said nothing. He simply stared down at his hands. Detectives watched him closely. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised.
Maybe even brought you guys closer, not maybe emotionally closer, but you guys were physically sort of working on things besides your kids.
There was a
mutual.
Yeah, there was, over the course of November, there was a better team feel.
Okay.
You know, we respond to crisis.
Right.
I had her as a partner to protect the family, but it didn't feel like a partner who valued me.
I mean, it sounds like you feel like you were completely, I don't know, written off by her, or that she had zero care for you anymore.
I don't want a divorce.
Okay. The Gmail account that, and you can speak more specifically.
And that text now number we were talking about, the number that he initially texted Kristil from. The Gmail account, the Kickman account that you guys initially received with the photo of you in it, and the phone number, those originated through their IP addresses at your office.
As far as we know right now, there's no physical way that Kickman could have been involved in this based on where he's at right now. So, you know, the mystery continues, and
things are certainly pointing in one direction right now.
All this time we've been looking for him, for the protection there. And you just found him today, like that.
Because I've been looking at you, but I've been waiting for these records to come back. You don't get the response and the openness you once did for about 28 days, from October 2nd to October 31st. So you amp it up a little bit. Send a photo of yourself to her, an account you created. See what her response is.
I drew that conclusion that a lot of this stalking stuff in this report that you guys, of this Kickman, has brought you closer and maybe given a little bit of hope in your relationship that you can accomplish something together.
I don't know where you're going with that.
You're using this.
My brain is fried.
I'm sure.
Kind of using this circumstance to bring you guys closer together. You yourself said that. Having the common goal of circling the wagons.
It's something along the lines that it felt like we were more teamwork.
Right.
I think there's a big gap between teamwork and rekindling a romance. You're done. Yeah, please have my phones and keys to my car.
The last thing that we're going to do before we get to that point is we need to process you for
As a husband, as a father. Not as police, again, family, utmost respect. I don't care if you capture him, I just want the fucker today. He took my children's mother for Christmas. They're never going to get over that. Find out. As a father. Don't just assume it's me. Keep looking.
On December 16, 2023, 2 days after the murder, officers surrounded Daniel Krug in the parking lot of a King Soopers grocery store in Broomfield. He was calm, compliant. In his pocket, they found a folded note addressed to his mother. It read like a farewell, short sentences about being lied to, about his conscience being clear, about being misunderstood. It ended with the words, "I didn't do this." He was taken into custody without incident. At the station, Daniel invoked his right to remain silent. He offered no statement, no denial, no plea for understanding. The man who had once played the grieving husband now said nothing at all. Prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder, 2 counts of stalking, and criminal impersonation. The story that had begun as a tale of an unseen predator had turned into one of the most shocking cases Colorado had ever seen. A husband who invented a stalker to terrorize his own wife, then killed her when the lie began to unravel. As investigators combed through the last of the evidence, more details emerged that filled in the blanks of that December morning. Forensic technicians determined that Kristil's head injuries came from a blunt object with 3 distinct impact points, consistent with someone being struck from behind in rapid succession. Her stab wound was clean, deliberate, and not consistent with self-infliction. There were no defensive wounds. The attack had been swift. Blood spatter patterns in the garage supported that theory. A faint arc on the wall suggested a blow from above, followed by a collapse to the floor. No struggle, no fight, just sudden violence. But perhaps the most haunting detail was the time sequence. The garage camera showed Daniel leaving at 8:24 a.m., yet forensic experts estimated Kristil's death occurred minutes before that, meaning when he got into his car and drove away, his wife was already dead. As the weeks passed, the community struggled to make sense of it. The Krugs had seemed like a normal family, 2 working parents, 3 bright children, a nice home. Neighbors described Kristil as warm, always smiling, devoted to her kids. Daniel, by contrast, came across as quiet, meticulous, somewhat withdrawn. No one imagined the darkness that had been growing behind those walls. When the trial began in April 2025, the courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the benches, and Kristil's family filled the front row, clutching each other's hands. The prosecution opened with a simple statement. This was not an act of passion, this was an act of control. They laid out the digital footprint, the staged texts, the disabled cameras, and the violent search history. They argued that Daniel's motive was rooted in control and humiliation, that when Kristil decided to end the marriage, he couldn't bear it. The defense countered with a different story. They claimed Daniel had been framed by circumstantial evidence, that investigators had rushed to judgment. They pointed out there was no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no weapon, and argued that grief had been mistaken for guilt.
And there is an enormous disconnect between that and the circumstantial picture that the prosecution wants you to believe. Mr. Krug did not kill his wife. He did not commit these crimes.
But the prosecution's timeline was airtight. The IP traces, the burner phone receipts, the surveillance footage, and the scheduled text message combined into one unshakable narrative.
This was about Dan losing control. He was not in love with Kristil, and that resentment had turned to rage by the time we get to December 14th. Think about what he did to her. You don't do that to somebody you love. Think about the absolute nightmare and hell that he made the last few months of her life.
When Daniel's browser history was displayed for the jury, his late-night searches about head trauma, the courtroom fell silent. Then came the security footage of him buying the prepaid cards. The evidence was no longer abstract. It was visual, undeniable, personal. Throughout the trial, Daniel sat motionless. He didn't look at the photos. He didn't react to the testimony. At one point, when shown images of Kristil's diary, his eyes flickered, just once. After a week of testimony, both sides rested. The jury deliberated for a single day. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Daniel Krug was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Kristil's family, the verdict brought justice, but not peace. Their daughter's careful notes, her determination to survive, and her trust in the system had helped solve her own murder. Yet the loss was too great to celebrate. As the judge pronounced the sentence, Linda wept quietly, holding a photo of her daughter smiling in the summer sun. The woman who had been tormented for months, who had begged for help, was finally free, but only in memory.
Beauty and style that it was so enjoyable to watch. As a mom, she got her kids involved in so many things. She was always running them all over the place with complete dedication to make sure that they were involved in the things that made them happy. So she juggled a lot of balls and pulled it off amazingly. There's no amount of justice that can bring her back. But it is a relief to know that the person who thought he was going to get away with it, with this convoluted alibi picture and...
When the courtroom emptied that afternoon, there was a heavy stillness that no one could quite put into words. The cameras turned off, the reporters packed up, and the story that had once filled headlines began to fade from the news cycle. But for the people who love Kristil Krug, the story never really ended. In the months following Daniel's conviction, friends and family began to share pieces of who she truly was. Not as a headline or a case file, but as a person. Her colleagues from the Boulder tech firm spoke of her sharp intellect and how she never missed a deadline. They remembered her as the kind of leader who kept a calm head under pressure, even when others didn't. Her neighbors remembered her for small, tender gestures, bringing cookies during the holidays, checking in on elderly couples after snowstorms, waving at kids as they walked home from school. Her mother, Linda, said that what hurt most wasn't just losing her daughter, but knowing how much fear she had endured in her final months, and that the man who vowed to protect her was the one who orchestrated every bit of it. Kristil had been trying to rebuild her life. Her diary entries told the story of a woman planning for freedom, setting new boundaries, preparing to move out, and focusing on her children's future. She wasn't reckless, and she wasn't lost. She was careful, cautious, and determined to live. Kristil's 3 children are now being raised by relatives. Her family has set up a memorial scholarship in her name for young women studying engineering, a way to carry on the brilliance and strength that defined her life. By April 2025, Daniel began serving his life sentence at a correctional facility in Colorado. He remains there today, showing little emotion or remorse. His attorneys filed no appeal, and if you want to hear more stories where truth is stranger than fiction, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Diaries. Every week we bring you the real cases that shook quiet towns, tested detectives, and revealed just how deep human deception can go. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and always look a little deeper. This is True Crime Diaries, where every story has a pulse.